to the master for the lecture. Let's start the second part, the open Q&A session.
I am a scholar from the philosophy department at Huazhong University of Science and Technology, where I study under the esteemed Professor Gao, though I personally remain an academic observer completely outside the formal practice of Buddhism. Although I've always personally wanted to learn a bit about it, so my specific question is more about acquiring objective knowledge. I'd like to know, you just mentioned and often talk about Mahayana Buddhism, but I'm deeply curious about the current actual state of contemporary Theravada Buddhism across Southeast Asia. Is it still being passed down? That's one question. Another question for you. You mentioned that you belong to Tibetan Buddhism, which is a particular branch of Buddhism. I would like to know more about what kind of relationship exists between Tibetan Buddhism and Chinese Buddhism, and how they might be connected or different from each other. And finally, before we finish, I have one more question to ask. I noticed that you just mentioned practicing Buddhism or aspiring to achieve Buddhahood. It's not so much about adhering to outward forms, but rather regarding the internal spiritual transformation of the mind. It's more about having a kind heart, having that intention. I just noticed something, and anyway, since I want to say it, I'll just say it. If I was disrespectful in any way, please forgive me. Just a few minutes into your lecture, you started to feel noticeably hot. So everyone started thinking, what should we do since you felt hot? They lowered the air conditioning temperature slightly and turned on the fans. At that moment, I had a feeling, just because you felt hot doesn't mean we all did. So when everyone did that collectively, what exactly were you thinking or reflecting upon at that specific time? Thank you.
The questions just now were quite good. What is the role of Theravada Buddhism? Actually, the main focus of Theravada Buddhism is to refrain from doing evil and to achieve self-liberation. Currently, in Sri Lanka and Myanmar, as well as in many other countries around the world, Theravada Buddhism is very flourishing. However, they are not very willing to use the terms Mahayana and Theravada. They don't consider themselves to be Theravada. They prefer to refer to themselves as the Shravakayana, a term which they find much more agreeable and fitting. So in fact, Theravada Buddhism is truly remarkable and noteworthy. Within the entire cycle of samsara in the three realms, it is seen as a burning house, in other words, and to be liberated from it. Moreover, the ascetic practices they undertake, especially some Theravada practitioners, far exceed and surpass those of us who practice Mahayana. Why is that? Their selfless acts of helping others and genuine altruism are remarkable. Some of them have incredibly vast aspirations. So we also deeply respect and admire genuine Theravada Buddhism. In fact, all the foundational monastic precepts in Tibetan Buddhism are all strictly upheld according to the original teachings of Theravada Buddhism. The second question is about the differences between Chinese Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism. Actually, as I just mentioned earlier this time, when Buddhism from India was introduced to the Han region, it gradually integrated with daily Han Chinese life. And when it was introduced to Tibetan area, it merged with Tibetan life. This is how the different traditions of Chinese and Tibetan Buddhism were passed down. However, what I want to emphasize is Tibetan Buddhism has a very complete system of study, contemplation, and practice, as well as teaching, debate, and composition. It also places great importance on lineage, which has never been interrupted. There is also a strong emphasis on the stages of practice and ritual procedures. So in Tibetan area, in every monastery, for example, in Cedar County, where I am now, the population is less than 50,000, but there are about 20 or so monasteries here. In every monastery, there is study, and there are Dharma teachers giving teachings and explanations. The local lay people and monastics often listen to teachings. In Han Chinese Buddhism nowadays, the main issue is that there are relatively few monasteries. There are very few monasteries in the city. Even if there are, only a few actually offer teachings and explanations of the Dharma. But what is most needed is the teaching and explanation of the Dharma. We have a great number of devoted Buddhists, but when you go to a monastery, many people still don't understand what the true principles of Buddhism are. In this regard, we really hope that in the future, not only will there be Dharma teachings in monasteries, specifically among lay university students or intellectual lay Buddhist groups, this trend persists. There will be genuine study of Buddhism as well. What interests me most is that it's truly a pity not to understand the principles of Buddhism. That's how I see it. As for the third question, you just said, I feel hot, but you may not feel hot. But judging from your current facial expressions and the specific way you are reacting, I can see that after many people turned on the fans just now, it seemed everyone felt more comfortable. Even the person who just asked a question was sweating on their face. If it's not from the heat, maybe it's cold sweat.
Hello, Master. I am also from the distinguished Huazhong University of Science and Technology. I truly believe that religion holds fundamental significance and importance for a society.
The question I want to ask is this. Because I feel that compared to Western Christianity, there is a very clear and particularly evident difference, a distinct contrast that stands out.
Western churches are typically built within urban communities, and their level of active social engagement is very high. I feel that Buddhism is basically always found isolated deep in the remote mountains and forests. Isn't that right? In short, I wonder if Buddhism should effectively learn from Christianity's proselytization strategies
and be more active in its participation in society.
The insightful question raised by this teacher is actually very good. In fact, Buddhism is not entirely secluded in the mountains, but in Tibetan and Han regions, many traditional temples are historically built in relatively quiet, remote places. So some time ago, I also proactively called on everyone to collectively address this critical issue. In a single major city, Christianity has many scattered urban churches. Some of them are officially approved public places of worship, while others are not, but operate in a highly flexible way, similar to private family temples or small informal religious fellowships. So, as active Buddhists, we should especially strive to establish Buddhist organizations within various diverse lay communities. In this regard, much like Christianity, we need more proactive grassroots outreach, including their work in charity, medicine, education, health, and environmental protection. In many aspects of integrating into society, they can be said to somewhat surpass us Buddhists. Right now in Buddhism, the first issue is that we lack organization. Everyone is quite individualistic. Everyone just burns incense and worships the Buddha, seeking their own liberation. Worship, 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 without caring about society. Of course, not all Buddhists are like this, but there are indeed some problems in this area. What the teacher just mentioned is absolutely correct. In the future, we Buddhists should care about society and develop a sense of organization. We need to have thoughtful and well-considered future plans and at the same time take on some important social responsibility. It should be said that, in terms of both doctrine and spirit, Buddhism, I dare say, contains many elements of altruism, perhaps even more than others. But when it comes to the actions of us Buddhists, this is an area where we probably need to improve in the future. Precisely because of this, some monasteries in Tibetan area used to be located in remote valleys, but now they are all moving closer to the cities. Last year, some people asked the abbots, "Aren't you monastics supposed to practice in quiet, secluded places? Why have you all moved to the roadside right now?" they were asked. They replied, "We need to adapt to the world and reach more sentient beings. If we stayed in the mountains, transportation would be somewhat inconvenient for us. That's why we've now moved to the roadside." We have this issue in Tibetan area as well, so what was said is correct.
Now, I'd like to ask a question that everyone is very concerned about, how to break through one's fate. Whether in Taiwan, Hong Kong, or the mainland, there is a TV series called The Story of Liao-Fan. And there is also something like a promotional video called The 4 Lessons of Liao-Fan. It has influenced many people. Its main idea is that each of us has a destiny, and for many people it is impossible to break through their fate. But Liao-Fan, whose secular name was Yuan Huang, was able to break through. It was because a wise master told him that he could keep a merit and demerit ledger. He would carefully record his good deeds by checking them off one by one. He would record his mistakes by checking them off the same way. In this way, he would calculate the results. If you do more good deeds, you can better change your destiny. I believe this. I think many people who have watched this TV series or this promotional video have very likely done the same thing. This promotional video and TV series were produced with Master Jing Kong as the consultant. My question is, do people really have a predetermined destiny? If so, can it actually be changed? If it can be changed, then through what specific means? Is it only by doing good deeds that one can change it? Thank you.
In works like Liao-Fan's 4 Lessons, the secret to changing one's destiny is discussed. Actually, destiny should exist, but within that predetermined destiny, there always lies a significant potential for dynamic individual transformation. According to both the exoteric and esoteric schools, there are differences. In fact, Buddhism does not actually teach that everything is entirely and completely predestined, and that nothing can ever be changed. It's not like that. Nor does it say that everything can be changed. It's not like that either. What it means is that there are still limits and boundaries, much like the laws that exist in our world. If the mistake you've made is extremely serious, then there are consequences that cannot simply be undone or taken back. No matter what connections you try to use, there's nothing you can do. In the end, you'll still be sentenced to death. But it's not really the case that nothing can be changed through connections. There are many different skillful means, and the concept of destiny that is spoken of in Buddhism is the same. Many aspects of destiny can definitely be changed by sincerely doing good deeds. But if something is particularly serious, doing good deeds can significantly lessen the effects of the consequences you experience or reduce the suffering you feel as a result, but it may not be completely changed. So, regarding this issue, when we discuss the chapter on karma in the Abhidharma Kosha, it is described in great detail. Therefore, we should take the time to carefully study and reflect upon the Buddhist teachings on the important topic of karma. In short, the Buddha did not say that absolutely everything in our lives is predestined or predetermined. For example, if in a previous life you killed or harmed many sentient beings, then in this life you will definitely experience suffering as a result. However, when you do good deeds have any effect on it? The answer is definitely yes. Just now, perhaps at this moment, some Tibetans wanted to ask questions, right?
Hello, I'm Sonam Joma from the School of Literature at Central China Normal University, class of 2008. If I speak Tibetan, perhaps everyone here won't understand, so for the sake of clarity, I'll speak in Chinese now. I'm very excited and honored today. Today's topic is the spiritual education needed in the new era. After listening to Khenpo's lecture, I personally feel that, since we are all future teachers, Khenpo mentioned 3 important points about being a teacher. One is to have little greed, another is to possess true wisdom, and the third is to have a truly caring heart. Why did I stand up? Because, as mentioned earlier, we Tibetans have a debate competition. Khenpo has already talked about speaking frankly and directly. So just now, the first student from Huazhong University of Science and Technology from the philosophy department, right? I think, well, if I may, to speak frankly and honestly and directly, the third question he asked made me feel particularly uncomfortable. Because Khenpo came to Central China Normal University today, we should show him the hospitality of a host. Why did he say he was very hot? Think about it. If he really considered this a very serious and solemn formal occasion, would he have actually said that so casually and quite impulsively? From my personal perspective, he came here today, he came as a true friend in a very close and intimate way. I'd like to ask this student, do you actually have a lot of close friends in your life? I mean, do you have any friends at all? How many of your friends, after coming to your house, would just take a drink from your fridge without asking? How many people, after entering your home, not even sure what you're saying, would just go to your fridge and grab a drink? I think this question is simple. What does this show? For us at Central China Normal University, this is nothing special. It's out of respect, out of friendliness. I think that for a friend, for someone you deeply respect, They really need a certain environment, a truly harmonious environment for open dialogue. I believe that Khenpo's way of putting it is, in fact, very harmonious and compassionate.
No, just to clarify, what exactly is your question right now at this moment?
Actually, I have a lot of questions to ask. But first, since this is supposed to be a place for speaking frankly, right? I feel like I need to bring this up first.
You two can talk about it privately later, after this. Go ahead and ask your question now. Otherwise, a lot of people are really interested and extremely eager to ask theirs too.
Sir, Gandhi Lottery, Carousel.
Translation?
Yes, please, because I didn't understand either.
Oh, then let me translate. I'm a university student, and I want to ask Khenpo a question. Today's topic is spiritual education, so I want to ask something about education. We Tibetan university students have studied in mainland China throughout our middle school, high school, and university years, living far away from home.
Our education has become aligned with that of inland China, and we've broadened our horizons as a result.
But personally, I feel that there is an insufficient emphasis placed on our native culture and mother tongue education.
There's also a weakening of religious awareness. This issue does exist.
Currently, bilingual education is being actively implemented, starting at the elementary school level in schools.
It might possibly be expanded further next year. I don't want to comment on this phenomenon personally. I'd like to ask for Khenpo Sodargye's opinion on this.
Also, most of the Tibetan university students present today are from Central China Normal University and are the future teachers of the Tibetan people.
They are about to graduate.
I would like to ask Khenpo Sodargye, is there anything in particular you would like to say or share with these individuals? In your opinion, how can they more effectively integrate the local culture into their work and daily activities? Additionally, what are your thoughts on how they can help Tibetan children receive a more complete and meaningful spiritual education?
Thank you.
It seems that even if you were to communicate in the Tibetan, I still wouldn't understand.
Because I'm from Ngari, my Lhasa dialect isn't standard.
No, I can understand Lhasa dialect, but maybe your voice was a bit too soft just now. Back when I went to India with the precious His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok as a close attendant during that historic journey, there were often times when I had to translate Lhasa dialect for him. The Lhasa dialect is like the different dialects across several provinces in the Han region, which vary significantly in their phonetics and regional expressions, making direct communication quite challenging for the uninitiated. There's a big difference between the Kham dialect and the Lhasa dialect. But I can actually understand it. Maybe your voice was just a bit low today. When you supplemented it with Mandarin just now, I understood. It seems we really do need to learn multiple languages to bridge cultural gaps effectively. The question you just raised is indeed a real and pressing issue in our rapidly evolving society, demanding our urgent attention and collective wisdom. Nowadays, many Tibetan university students have been reading textbooks from the Han region since childhood, essentially shaping their cognitive frameworks and worldviews. Most of the textbooks for Tibetan students now use stories from the Han region. For example, the story of Liao-Fan, the story of the hero Huang Jiguang, These are translated into Tibetan, effectively introducing modern secular virtues through a familiar local linguistic medium. After being translated into Tibetan, we start learning them from a young age. We have also previously informed the relevant departments that the relevant local culture nurtures local people within their unique native environment. Tibetan area has its own traditions and philosophies. It might be better to learn on this foundation. But now, after many university students go to the Han region, basically their habits, language, and thinking are very similar to those of Han people, reflecting a profound shift in their fundamental cultural identity and daily lifestyle choices. Actually, there's nothing wrong with this. It should be acceptable. But on the other hand, it's a bit of a pity. Many people have gradually lost the original sense of dedication they once had to their faith and to showing filial piety toward their parents. Furthermore, in the course of daily interactions between individuals, there is a very beautiful Tibetan tradition which is compassion. All of these have faded, and I also find this rather regrettable. Some university students, after returning from certain schools, are not particularly outstanding, though some are quite good. No matter what, I hope that wherever you are, you remain steadfast in preserving your spiritual roots and integrity, while striving to contribute meaningfully to your community. We often say that the love between people is the same for everyone. Whether you are British, Han, or Tibetan, it's all the same. There's no difference in our fundamental human capacity for compassion. There are no limits or boundaries to the spread of love and compassion, no barriers in between at all. But most importantly, you must not abandon your own traditional culture and heritage. So in this regard, I hope that wherever our students go, first you should value your own language and script. At the same time, you should also learn the beneficial and valuable knowledge from various advanced cultures around the world. Secondly, for many students in the humanities and liberal arts, when you graduate and enter society, maybe you don't have much else to offer, but I place great importance and emphasis on cultivating compassion. Just as Master Shantideva once said wisely, love others as you love yourself. Do not do to others what you do not want done to yourself. Our ancestors also taught this. Don't force onto others what you yourself dislike. This is the greatest principle in life. So I hope that when our university students enter various professional positions in society, we must always treat others with a compassionate heart. I think this is the most important thing.
Hello, Master. I am a teacher from the Center for Mind and Cognition Research at Central China Normal University. I would like to ask you a question, Master. Nowadays, people talk a lot about the issue of happiness. Some say that happiness is caring for others, while others say that happiness is built upon the suffering of others. May I ask, Master, how do you personally define happiness?
This is how I see it clearly and firmly. Our own personal happiness must never be built upon the suffering and pain of others in any way. Not just the suffering of other people around us, but also the suffering of any sentient being whatsoever. A renowned Western philosopher once said very wisely, if humanity builds its own happiness and prosperity on the sacrifices and deaths of other lives and beings, then humanity is already doomed to extinction and destruction. He said something like this very clearly. So, even when we eat our meals, celebrate the New Year festival, or get married in ceremonies, many people slaughter countless animals and kill countless sentient beings. On the days when we are truly happy, in fact, many sentient beings have given up their most precious lives. From our perspective, this is extremely cruel. So, as human beings, we certainly can pursue happiness in our lives and existence with great care. Buddhism also acknowledges and recognizes that happiness can be pursued and attained, but our happiness must be built on the foundation of not harming any sentient being at all. On such a basis, we should be truly joyful and content. Otherwise, if this kind of mindset continues to spread, at a certain point, humanity, they might perhaps, very well, for their own benefit and personal happiness, kill others or rob others. Such a society would be uncivilized, and such happiness would be meaningless.
Hello, Master. Just now, I happened to hear you mention in your recent talk that Mr. Toynbee, the well-known historian, said the 21st century is the century of China. Could you explain this? I understand it means a century of Chinese culture. It's not, in fact, a century ruled by the Chinese people. This raises a very important and profound question, and many contemporary scholars and thinkers today share this same view and perspective. Is it a century where Chinese people use Chinese culture to lead and guide the world, or is it foreigners, or perhaps some people from China who have gone overseas, who possess and preserve true Chinese culture? Chinese culture serves as a complement to Western culture. Ironically, within China, in our own country, our traditional Chinese culture is actually not as significant or as influential as Western culture, especially in many aspects of life. It actually benefits our country's current situation and development more in many ways. Many people, for example, many educated teachers and professors, including those in our philosophy department and other academic fields, they also think this way and share this view. Perhaps we need to Westernize first, and after we have a freer environment, then religious freedom or traditional culture can have a good and supportive environment to develop and flourish properly and healthily. The main question is, Master Khenpo, what do you think and feel of this important phenomenon in our society? And there's another question, a related one to this topic. You just mentioned the controversial and tragic case of Yao Jiaxin. He was just executed recently by the state. When he was sentenced to death by the court, there were also a few prominent legal scholars and experts across the country who wanted to use this high-profile case to discuss the controversial issue of abolishing the death penalty. They debated this on their Weibo accounts and online platforms. The vast majority of Chinese netizens and internet users in general had an attitude of not really understanding them at all. The reason I say this phenomenon is related to what I just mentioned earlier. Our current human rights situation is, you could say, very poor and quite concerning. Many people are experiencing a strong and urgent longing for change. There is a widespread and pressing emotional need among people, a deep desire for better protection and respect for basic human rights. As we just mentioned, people hold the attitude of wanting to abolish the death penalty. This attitude is shared by many who hope for a more just and humane society where the value of human life is respected and protected. I can see that on a deeper level they have a kind of religious habit, but for many ordinary people this situation is quite awkward. What do you think of this particular phenomenon? Those are my two questions. Thank you.
All right. Regarding the first important and interesting question we just discussed together here today, Dr. Arnold Toynbee also wrote a famous and influential book called A Study of History. In this comprehensive book, he also provides a detailed and thorough analysis. His approach to studying history is different from some people nowadays who only focus on dates or the appearance of certain figures. He was quite visionary and insightful, analyzing everything with his own great wisdom and deep understanding. He examined carefully the demise and decline of every nation's culture and civilization, including the profound and significant impact that religious beliefs had on them, and so on. He explained everything in great detail and with clarity. As I just recently mentioned, his point was not to completely westernize. Nowadays, we are entirely and completely abandoning our own traditional culture, and then using Western culture and values as our ultimate goal and final destination in life. I don't think that was his true and original intention at all. We should be able to accept and embrace things from the West, such as democracy and peace. These are things that humanity will inevitably have to develop and embrace and move toward in the future for progress and survival. In the past, the great civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. said famously, "I have a dream." Later, I saw that when the renowned journalist Bai Yansong went to Yale University in the United States, he also used the topic, "My Chinese Dream." He was also engaging in an exchange of ideas that leaned toward democracy and freedom and human rights. I think humanity will eventually take such steps forward and make progress. it's only a matter of time before this happens. Complete Westernization. Western countries like the United States have only 500 or 600 years of historical culture. The traditions that have come from this history may offer us certain benefits in some areas where we can be more open, but in some respects, it may not necessarily be beneficial. That's my view. Secondly, just now, the case of Yao Jiaxin being sentenced to death. There may be different opinions about it across the country. However, for any nation or country, any place or region, in fact, democracy can only be implemented successfully at a high level of development and education. Otherwise, it won't succeed or work properly at all. So I personally think that only when there is a certain very high level of quality can any kind of thinking and ideology be more mature and well developed. Therefore, there are many different and conflicting opinions about some of his actions and decisions. Personally, as I just mentioned earlier before, perhaps one person cannot represent everyone in society at all, but within this there are also many different perspectives. Sometimes we tend to turn morality into something more political in nature, and when we judge things by other, perhaps external standards, the issue itself becomes more complicated. Our discussion today is entirely focused on research conducted in the fields of morality and religious studies. Therefore, my personal view is that there may be some potentially complex issues that I really haven't thought about very deeply.
I'd like to ask if people have past lives, present lives, and future lives.
You are?
I am a freshman majoring in ideological and political education at the School of Political Science and Law, Central China Normal University. If people have past lives, present lives, and future lives, why does the population keep increasing? And I have another question. From a historical perspective, I see that there have been 3 instances of foreign civilizations being introduced into China. Buddhism began during Emperor Ming's reign in the Eastern Han Dynasty. After several centuries, it became integrated into the Chinese nation, and many aspects of Chinese culture have been influenced by Buddhism. The second was Christianity, which of course failed. The third was Marxism. As for whether it has succeeded or failed now, I can't make a definitive judgment. But what I want to ask is this. Why did Buddhism have such a truly remarkable ability to integrate into the Chinese nation? How did it eventually become a part of the Chinese nation? Those are my 2 questions.
The first question is, you asked if people have past and future lives. Why does the population on Earth keep increasing? In fact, sentient beings are not limited to merely those on Earth that we know of. Also, according to Buddhism and what astronomers say now, there are truly countless, boundless, and immeasurable planets in this vast space-time universe. There are innumerable, limitless worlds and universes. Both the Buddhist Abhidharma Kosa and the Mahavaipulya Mahasanipata Sutra mention this. This world and universe is not just what we see and perceive now with our limited senses. So there are countless sentient beings living everywhere, including beings other than humans in different realms and dimensions. It's very possible that you are a human today, but you were transformed from another sentient being. For example, animals, beings from hell, hungry ghosts, celestial beings, and so on. So we only encounter humans, and apart from that, we can't see the others in our surroundings. But Buddhist teachings say there are countless sentient beings. That's why the number of people on Earth is increasing. There are many sentient beings. It's not that there are none besides humans.
With the current population increase, which realm is decreasing? They have been reborn as humans. So from which of the 6 realms of samsara did they reincarnate into the human realm?
Yes, that's right. Which realm has decreased? This is specifically described in our treatises. Those who have created virtuous karma, for example, those who have done good deeds in the past, some sentient beings in the hell realm within the 6 realms of samsara. The sentient beings in hell are as numerous as the stars in the night sky, while sentient beings among animals are as few as stars in the daytime. And humans are even fewer in number, like the dust on a fingernail, extremely rare. So if you compare the numbers after beings in the 3 lower realms have finished experiencing suffering, they become human. Therefore, it can't be a fixed number. There isn't a specific statistic or official count for this at the moment. That's one question. Now, the second question, you asked why Buddhist thought still plays such an important and influential role among humans today. I believe that, regardless of which doctrine or school of thought it is, true Buddhism cannot be overthrown by any ideology. The reason it can't be overthrown is because it is the truth. This kind of truth is like real gold that does not fear being burned by fire. In the same way, within Buddhism, for more than 2,500 years since ancient times, this year is already the 2,555th year of the Buddhist calendar. During this period, there have been countless thinkers, politicians, and writers. They have studied Buddhism to varying degrees, but up to now, there has not been a single ideology that has completely overthrown it. So in this regard, I hope that many of our intellectuals should get involved in the study of Buddhism so that they can truly understand its truth and the role it plays in human society. The reason it cannot be overthrown by history is precisely because it is the truth.
Hello everyone, I am Suolang Jiruo from the School of Life Sciences at Central China Normal University. Originally, I didn't have the courage, but when my senior stood up and was ridiculed, I felt a bit upset. This was the first time I stood up like this. My question is related to my major, and I actually have two questions. The first is that my major is in the School of Life Sciences. This semester, we have to do dissections every day, dissecting all kinds of fish. As you know, in our Tibetan Buddhism, fish are considered sacred animals, but they have to be dissected by us, and while they're still alive. This causes a lot of pain for those of us doing the dissections. It's like stabbing a knife into yourself. It's even more painful than that. So every time there's a dissection, I just don't do it. My classmates all ask, "You don't dissect because you believe in Buddhism, right?" And I say yes, absolutely. Some of my classmates really do understand me very well. Some classmates would say, "Hey, what's the big deal about believing in Buddhism?" Some would say, "Believing in Buddhism is just superstition. Why do you even believe in that?" I was really angry, but I just sat there quietly, unnoticed, because I didn't need to answer them. Because I was the only Tibetan there. No matter what I said, they wouldn't listen anyway. The second question is, some classmates ask me this. Sai, when it comes to science, there's really no such thing as faith. Today I have two questions to ask the master. The first question is faith just a form of superstition? The second question is, in the face of science, does faith really have no place? What are your thoughts on this? Thank you.
Girls from our Tibetan region and homeland are generally more timid and shy by nature. So I'm very happy and pleased and encouraged that she bravely asked this important and meaningful question today in front of everyone. Just now, specifically regarding her question about anatomy. For people without any particular faith or spiritual beliefs whatsoever, it may possibly not matter at all to them personally. But for those who do have faith, this is something that is incredibly and extremely painful. Actually, as I mentioned earlier in my talk about faith and belief, I think it can be put this way. Saying that faith is superstition is not in any way a reasonable statement. Not long ago, at the prestigious Fudan University, during a recent event, I quoted Liang Qichao. Liang Qichao, a noted reformer in modern history of China, was someone who made tremendous contributions to the country and to humanity. He was a renowned and accomplished writer, as well as a thinker and historian. He carefully and seriously analyzed Buddhist faith, stating that it is not superstition, but true faith. The reasons for this have already been explained very clearly. So, if faith were truly just superstition, I really cannot in good conscience accept that viewpoint. It's not just that I don't accept it. If you feel there are some solid and well-founded reasons, that's perfectly fine. Because what we commonly call superstition is actually a particular kind of belief or conviction that does not conform to actual logical reason. But if that's the case, then in the past, for example, the famous scientist Bertrand Russell, who was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in the year 1950. He also mentioned that, in his opinion, among all religions, the one he personally admired the most was Buddhism. So what exactly did he admire? It was the philosophy of Buddhism. The philosophy of Buddhism is not what some of us mistakenly imagine it to be in our minds and hearts at all. So I sincerely hope that whether you are a student or a teacher here today, if you think Buddhism is superstition, you might need to study it further. Otherwise, as an intellectual, if you make casual or offhand statements without proper and thorough observation, it's just like what the great playwright Shakespeare once said, so wisely and profoundly, never criticize or judge harshly things you do not understand at all. Otherwise, you may have to pay for your mistakes with your life dearly. So we should not easily define or dismiss things we do not understand ourselves without proper investigation. Faith should not be considered mere superstition or blind belief without foundation. Now, the second important and interesting question I want to address is there any room or place for faith in the face of modern science? In fact, true science is a very serious and rigorous attitude toward judging things carefully and evaluating truth objectively and accurately. So, since ancient times, many scientists have maintained a fair and objective attitude in their exploration of ideas and phenomena. Therefore, when many people today use the name of science to deny the truth, such an approach is unreasonable. However, there are indeed some people who do not understand or simply do not have faith themselves. We can also understand their choice. It is understandable because their environment, education, and many other factors all play a role. So, no matter what, everyone, absolutely everyone, I always feel that you shouldn't let yourself be unhappy or in pain. If it really doesn't work out well for us, you should repent sincerely and deeply with genuine remorse. If we truly have no other way or alternative option available and end up committing wrongdoings. Reciting Om Benza Satohang with devotion can purify some negative karma and obscurations. At the same time, whether it's towards any fellow student or teacher around us, we shouldn't have an unhappy or resentful attitude at all. Everyone should respect each other and be happy together. Approaching things with this kind of positive and compassionate mindset is better.
I am also a teacher in the philosophy department at Central China. I have 3 questions. The first question is directly related to today's topic. The first 2 questions are directly related to today's topic. The first question is, you just mentioned the concept of impermanence. So what is the relationship between impermanence and the education of our minds? What is the relationship between the impermanence of life and spiritual education? I'm not sure if the master can hear me clearly and well. The second important question is, since we are talking about spiritual education and its importance, I am also a teacher myself working in education. How should we properly and effectively carry out spiritual education now in schools? Could I ask Khenpo to kindly elaborate in more detail on what is specifically included in spiritual education? This is the second question that I would like to raise. The third question is as follows. When I was reading and studying the treatise on the awakening of faith in the Mahayana, I thought of a particular question. The treatise says, true suchness does not remain or abide in its own nature, and when a thought suddenly arises, ignorance appears as a result. The treatise says that this ignorance has existed from time without beginning. Why does it say that ignorance has existed from time without beginning? If that is the answer, ignorance has existed from the very beginning and has always been present. If this is considered an answer in this particular context, but I feel that maybe it still needs some further explanation as the subject is quite deep and not immediately easy to understand. Why does true suchness, by not abiding in its own nature, suddenly give rise to thoughts? In other words, what is the reason that ignorance appears? That is my question, and I would be grateful for your insight and explanation. Thank you for considering my inquiry.
After the teacher finishes asking all the questions today, will I forget everything that was discussed here completely? The first important question is about the relationship between impermanence and spiritual education and development. Actually, I was thinking deeply and carefully when we talk about spiritual education and its importance. Of course, there are many ways to interpret the mind or spirit, but today, my focus and emphasis on the mind is mainly on the Mahayana Buddhist concept of altruism and compassion and the Confucian ideals of respect and filial piety as the main themes and principles. From this perspective and point of view, what we should do in education is, without a doubt, extremely important in this regard. When I talk about the concept of impermanence, it's not just about education itself, but also about external material things, and even our own human bodies. These are all, in fact, impermanent. So the relationship between them. In fact, impermanence encompasses all conditioned phenomena, all things and events. Unconditioned phenomena are not included. In the Abhidharmakosha, this is specifically addressed. All conditioned things and events are impermanent. Although they are impermanent, within impermanence we need to extract the true essence, the real truth. Some aspects of impermanence have no real significance, and these are things we do not seek for the time being. Some aspects of impermanence are truly precious. This is an education for our minds, something we must accept. Therefore, this is the fundamental and crucial distinction between the general and the specific aspects and approaches. I truly and firmly believe with all my heart that education should be like this in essence. Now, regarding the second important and relevant question you just mentioned, the main content and focus of spiritual education. Here, I am not talking about the true mind or anything else. The focus is on moral spirituality. When it comes to moral spirituality, it is about our own self-adjustment of the mind. Purify your own mind. This is the teaching of Buddhism. That is, one's own mind must reach a certain state. This kind of state is something that many of us, whether teachers or college students, are quite lacking in. There is a lack of self-confidence. Moreover, when facing modern and complex society and its challenges, our motivation and vitality are rather fragile and easily weakened. So, regarding this critical and important issue, we must have a truly courageous ladder for the mind to climb and develop. At the same time, in this world, we really shouldn't be striving every day just for ourselves. We should truly care for all of society and for the people around us. This is a concept from Mahayana Buddhism. So when we talk about the mind here, ultimately, it is about altruism, helping others, and the spirit of finding joy in helping others. The main content of spiritual elevation that we are discussing today. For your third question about ignorance, in the treatise on the awakening of faith in the Mahayana, some scriptures say ignorance has existed since beginningless time, while others state that suchness is eternal. In fact, the analogy between ignorance and suchness is discussed in the Uttaratantra Shastra. Ignorance is likened to clouds that suddenly, almost unexpectedly, appear in the sky. Suchness and Buddha nature are like the sky itself. From the perspective of the sky, dark clouds are not permanent. But if you consider the moisture that forms the clouds, it has existed since beginningless time. Therefore, because the duration is extremely long and extended, it is often referred to as since beginningless time. In fact, when compared to suchness, it only appears occasionally. So, if we use the analogy of the sky and the clouds to help us understand this, the difference between our mind's true nature and ignorance becomes quite clear.
Hello, I am a graduate student in science and engineering. I have a certain interest in both philosophy and Buddhism. But I don't have much time to read books in these areas, and I noticed in your book that you wrote that even if we scholars and professors read a lot of books about Buddhism, we might still deviate from the true intent of Buddhism. Chan Buddhism says, do not rely on words and letters, but directly point to the mind's nature. It explains many things through practice, not by using words to express or convey principles, right? These principles are not obtained through reading texts, but through one's own personal practice. So if someone like me, for instance, wants to explore how Buddhism actually explains this world, this universe, and has this kind of desire, this kind of interest and passion, but I don't really have much time to practice or to read books, so do you think I can solve my problem? Thank you.
Here's the thing. The state of not relying on words and letters that you mentioned, in fact, for someone in Chan Buddhism who has reached a relatively high level, when they attain that state, they don't rely on words and letters. There is such a saying. For us ordinary people now, reading books. I hope to read books by yourself. If you haven't read and just think not relying on words and letters or practicing alone is enough, in our tradition of hearing, contemplating and meditating, we should first listen to teachings, then read and reflect, and only then practice. If you lack both the hearing and contemplation stages at the beginning, then practicing on your own is just blind cultivation without direction. So generally speaking, the state of not relying on words and letters is extremely advanced. And before we reach that state, we must spend a long time learning and studying. That's why we always emphasize the importance of hearing and contemplation. By continuously making this effort, we can ultimately achieve true success.
Thank you to the students for your excellent questions. I want to thank Khenpo for his detailed, patient answers. I believe that everyone who came here today has gained a lot from Khenpo's lecture. I believe that what Khenpo has shared with us is truly beneficial and virtuous knowledge. So our lecture officially ends here now.